What's going on, everybody? Matt and Kyle here. We're doing another progressions meeting. Figure we start these back up. We've kind of been on hiatus for a while with figuring out COVID and writing progressions for people for COVID, or coaching people through COVID. But competition season is starting to pick back up here, so we have some progressions that we kind of have run throughout the course of COVID. So we just wanted to kind of chat about some of those, maybe give you guys some ideas of things you can do in your own training, or if you guys have questions about how we kind of worked through some of these progressions. We'd be more than happy to answer them. So let me share screen here. One participant can share at a time. Oh, whoops. Desktop. Apparently I forgot how to use this over COVID. Okay, cool. So this one's a little bit shorter, guys. The goal of this one was to get this individual a little bit more powerful on machines. We ended up at the end of the cycle PRing his 500 meter by 2 seconds. A little bit of background on this athlete. He's a little bit shorter. Power output is not super high, but if we give him kind of wave formats, he tends to do a little bit better with those. So kind of building and ramping up the central nervous system. So the goal was to try and create a little bit of a progression around that with the cyclical machines. Over quarantine, he had very limited equipment, and so I just kind of wanted to see what he was capable of, and we got to some pretty outrageous volume with the equipment that he did have. So I figured we could load up the volume. So some of these things that you might see here are pretty aggressive in regards to like the volume standpoint. But this individual is just pretty good at handling volume and needs like a little bit more, like quite a significant amount of volume to adapt. So he's kind of like higher intensity, higher volume adapter. Don't really see that much. Sorry, I shouldn't say higher intensity as in 100% intensity, but higher intensity relative to his max is what he'll need to adapt. You don't see it that much inside of athletes, but this guy's kind of a unique case in regards to that. So this is 3 weeks of the cycle here, just kind of some different formats that we used. We progressed it. We basically progressed each one of these volume-wise for 1 week, so it was about a 6-week progression. And on that 7th week, we tested his 500 meter row time that he PR'd. So this first one is kind of more of just a base building. We gave him at 100% intervals. He would start to fall off on this on the 22nd, but the idea of this was kind of to get him touches kind of ramped up to that 20-second pace, and then try and kind of maintain his paces on the back half. So, warm it up, again, kind of getting that central nervous system firing for the 10 and the 15, kind of get a little bit more of some strength endurance or strength touches for those, that 20-second piece where he might fall off a little bit on it, and then try and have him maintain those, recruiting that muscle fiber on the 15 and 10. So that was kind of the idea and premise behind this. We gave it to him on the assault bike and the rower. This was a standalone session in and of itself. As you can see, it can get pretty long with the 60 seconds rest in between, 3 minutes rest in between that. So just a volume progression for that for the next week. Then we went on, basically gave him 3 minutes of pretty intense work on the rower and the assault bike here, with some 3 minutes rest in between, try and just let him recover. This one was a little bit different. We started him off a little bit faster and let him kind of build down from there. So this one we were hoping that the 30 seconds was enough to recruit, and then he was putting some pretty good intensity into that last 10 seconds on the either assault bike or rower there. This one he did have he peaked right about in the 20-second row, so his 10-second was a little bit more of a suffering. We did progress it for 2 weeks, then we went over to this this progression where we just had him bike and row, so just kind of warm the movement pattern up. I didn't really give him any guidelines for this. It was just going at a set pace, whatever he felt for that day. And then, or I'm sorry. So this one was set intervals. So he had 12 cal assault bike and 250 meter row. So set 1 was at 80 plus, set 2 was at 85, and then set 3 was at 100%. So again, it was a shorter rest, ramp the central nervous system up, kind of give them that wave format. This one is a little bit more traditional to the wave format. And just had them kind of get after it on that set 3. So warming it up for set 1 and set 2, and then set 3 is kind of that intensity that he brings. And so after, I think we did a volume progression here as well. After this one, we tested his 500 meter row, and that is when he PR'd by 2 seconds on that. So some of the takeaways that we had from this is probably would keep the pull out the 20-second intervals on the first one here, on this first one here. Maybe pull out that 20-second and 25-second on the rower, and just go 10, 15, 15, 10, and 15, 20, 20, 15. On this one here, might pull out the 30-second interval, honestly, and then just have them go 20 and 10, and then maybe a 5-second one. Maybe even reverse this. You could potentially reverse it and go 5, 10, 20. Might be a little bit better for his central nervous system to warm up. The other thing is, I mentioned before, is this guy does pretty good with intensity and mixing in the volume, or he has a little bit higher volume. Maybe it's not super high volume for him, but higher volume than traditional individuals. So you want to be cognizant of who you give this to with an athlete. If you're giving it to a little bit more of a powerful athlete, someone like Matt or myself, we're just going to get messed up from this. By interval 1, we're going to be done and like rolling on the floor and want to just die. So be careful with something like this. It's pretty, I guess you could use the word potent. So, make sure that the athlete that you're giving it to might not do a great job of eliciting power into either machines or lifting in general. And typically you'll see that with individuals who are able to use wave formats a little bit better. So if you're going to use this one, just be cognizant of that. For a powerful athlete, you could probably get away with something like 5, 10, 15 on the rower, 5, 10, 20 on the rower, and maybe like 2 to 3 sets of that. And they could adapt to that on this progression here, and maybe like a 5, 10, 15, 10, 5 on this assault bike one, and give them some progression there for that. So this one might work okay. This is for a powerful athlete. This is a little bit more like a lactate endurance for a powerful athlete, though. Normally they don't have to really warm up that central nervous system. They're just kind of ready to rock with whatever it is they're trying to put power into. So those are some kind of takeaways from this progression. I don't know, Matt, did you have any questions on this or any thoughts? Or
wave is definitely a classic format for on the strength side, building that absolute strength. So it's cool to see it applied in that tap setting, working on machine power. Just to reiterate what Kyle was getting at, be careful about who you're giving it to, because those, especially that 20 and 25 seconds on the bike and the rower early on, you probably want to give that to a less powerful athlete. Otherwise, you're ending their day very early.
Yeah, they're going to go nap for 6 to 8 hours after this session. Yeah, this guy has a little bit of trouble eliciting power into machines and in general, so that's why those are a little bit higher. Even still, I'd probably even bump those times down with him now if we were to go back and do the cycle. So yeah, just take that note and look at adjusting the time frame to this, and make sure you're giving it to an individual. Somebody that's a little bit newer to machine work or newer to power work might do well with something like this as well. So do you have anything else, Matt? Or
no, but it's cool, and those results are awesome.
Yeah. The PR on the I think we're gonna test his power output here soon on the assault bike, but the PR on the row was pretty exciting. So yeah, and a lot of his some of his strength metrics are started. He's hitting like double PRs on deadlifts for sets right now, so that's pretty exciting.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, so I think he's definitely a little bit more powerful right now. So I
Yeah.
was part of this progression as well. So we'll flip over to Matt here. All right. Okay.
All right.
So you
So
just
I
want
have I have a couple
straight down.
progressions
Okay.
in one right now.
Okay.
First so it all has to do with heavier deadlifts. So the first progression is working on 50 deadlifts for time at 315, which this athlete hasn't been a fan of heavier deadlifts ever. So getting him to be able to attack those heavier deadlifts a little bit better. So we tested this first week, and he rocked a 451. So not a bad time at all for 50 deadlifts at 315, but not quite where we want him. So with the progression, we have volume, intensity, and density, and those we're just playing with those three variables. So if we jump down to week 2, we're based on how his feedback was and how he broke it up, and he broke it up early and often. I wanted to work on, all right, let's just get used to pulling a little bit longer. So we started off with every 2 minutes for 5 sets, 12 deadlifts, shooting for unbroken, and I believe he rocked that. So a little bit higher volume than we did the previous week. This took 10 minutes, so about twice as long, but we were getting those bigger sets of deadlifts in. And then if we jump down to the next week, week 3, all we did was he was crushing it on the time, saying he was feeling recovered. We cut down the how frequently he was doing. So he was going every minute or every 2 minutes. Now he's going every minute and 45 seconds. But it was still keeping the 12 deadlifts and still keeping that unbroken aspect. Then if we jump down to week 4, all right, we're upping the number of deadlifts. So upping it to 15, we're keeping the volume the same, and we also upped that time a little bit for it. Week 5, then was a little bit of a deload going into his retest. So drops the weight, drops the volume, and just just get used to get a touch on the deadlifts, but we want to be recovering for the next week. And then week 6, got after it and got a 341 on his deadlift. So he took off over 1 minute and 10 seconds on his 50 deadlifts for time in just 6 weeks. So really only 3 weeks of progression and a deload, and took 1 minute 10 off by just playing with getting comfortable moving that bar, upping the density, and then upping the volume within this, upping the density and then upping the intensity with the bigger sets. So after that, we started to work on making it a little bit more sport specific. So week 7, we start going into a little bit of hinging endurance with, so it's down in part C is the applicable part here. So, okay, we got good at 315 deadlifts, but it's probably not going to be just 315 deadlifts in the workout. So let's work on applying it, and let's also not only getting it in a more of a sports specific setting, but also working on that hinge endurance. So first week, just row, deadlift, swing, shooting for unbroken through that. And so we got a few touches of similar aspects of that, of the endurance, that mixed in the workouts played around with the number of rounds, played around with the intensity, played around with the movements, got into some power cleans as well. And then on week 11, that's when we kick into our next progression. And we got our tester of 21-15-9 deadlifts at 315 and strict handstand push-ups. So not only was this athlete not a fan of heavier deadlifts, but also not the biggest fan of strict handstand push-ups. So what better thing to do than to smash them together? Let's get good at that. So did the tester of 21-15-9 and rocked a 542 for both of those. And when I first started working with this athlete, we're talking like 5 minutes max handstand push-ups was around 30. So to be able to knock out in a little over 5 minutes the strict handstand push-ups and the deadlifts, like that in itself was already a big victory, but we can do better than that. So started working on putting this together. So we jumped down to week 12. We started playing with it this time we upped the intensity on this progression. So deadlifts, we made those a little bit heavier, and the strict handstand push-ups, we made them a deficit. So we went every 4 minutes for 7 sets. So that density was a little bit more spread out, but when he was getting it, he was really getting after it. And then just some easy ski just to recover a little bit, work on that aerobic base in between those sets.
Matt, can you explain how the intensity was risen on that, just for people that are unsure of?
Yeah. So the loading went up from 315 to 325 on the deadlifts, and then on the strict handstand push-ups, it became deficit by adding an inch. So the individual movement is a little bit tougher. So we didn't jack up the intensity crazy, but just a little bit tougher.
Yeah. So when it comes to like weightlifting, and like a lot of people think intensity is like percentage of perceived effort, but when it comes to weightlifting, intensity is a little bit more poundage lifted. So 315 to 325 is an intensity increase, and then if you're increasing your range of motion, essentially you're going to be increasing force production, which is going to increase intensity for the deficit strict handstand push-ups. So that's the kind of that intensity increase there. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks. So then week 13, we upped the volume a little bit. So we kept the 325, we kept the strict deficit handstand push-ups at 1 inch, but 12 reps instead of 4 reps. And we dropped the volume a little bit too there. So we went from doing 70 reps in the session to 60 reps in the session, but overall similar volume. Week 14, we dropped the density with those. So we dropped the number of reps, but we upped the intensity by adding the weight, going a little bit bigger on those deficits, and we kept the volume the same. Week 15, we upped the volume. So bigger sets this time. We're doing 15s each time. We kept the volume. We were starting to get ready for what's coming, so we dropped the volume down with it since we were doing those bigger, denser sets. And then, and relatively speaking, that was actually his deload week. So no longer do we have the deficit. No longer are we are dropping a little bit of weight. So it wasn't a big time deload, but it relative to what he had been doing, it was a little bit of a deload. And then week 16, we retested, and his Diane went, this variation of Diane, the 21-15-9 of the 315 and the strict handstand push-ups, dropped to 511, and he said it was a bad day too. So I believe, and he believes that he can go sub 5 on this. So at week 1, we were doing a 453, 15 deadlifts, or 50 deadlifts at 315. And by the end of it, he was almost doing a full Diane in about the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So,
You did. How did you guys manage like low back fatigue through this time?
he never talked about low back at all.
Okay.
So he's a pretty good mover, and we've been building positions and core work for a while. So my guess is that's why low back didn't really come into play.
Yeah. Okay. And were you guys doing any accessory work on top of this session for like his strict handstand push-ups? Were you guys working on any sort of like upper body pressing on the second day, or was this primarily he was just strict handstand?
We were doing 2 days of pressing, but most of that strict handstand push-up progress came through. It's session 1, when we get into the deadlift handstand push-up progression, his AM session was exactly what you see there. So it's short. We're getting after this progression, and then flush out, get out, and recover a little bit. In the PM sessions, we were doing some pressing density for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
The PM sessions on those days we were getting dips in, we were doing shoulder to overhead, we were playing with variations of pressing endurance.
Okay. Yeah. What type of athlete would you recommend this for?
So I definitely needs to have a little bit of capacity already in the bank with the deadlift, and with this I would say they'd want to make sure that they have a strong enough core to handle the volume, so that low back situation doesn't happen.
Yeah. So you almost think for this progression specifically, you need to build like a pretty good base level before you go into something like this, like making sure like your position is really good and making sure you have some pretty good core strength prior to going into something like this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So would you change anything up based off of like if you were doing this for a female? Because obviously this was for 15. If that was a female, that'd be crazy.
315 deadlifts would be mighty impressive.
Yeah.
So for a female, they can probably handle a little bit more on the. Typically, females can handle a little bit better volume. So probably be looking at upping the volume at least on the deadlifts, depending on the female with the upper body pressing. That upper body pressing might need to be hit 3 times a week, and it might be a little bit lower reps in those pieces to account for that. Ideally, building towards a bigger set in the EMOMs towards the end.
Okay. Would you do anything different with like density, with your kind of density to volume progression and then intensity volume progression? Would you change any of that stuff up, or would you keep it relatively the same? Does that make sense?
Yeah. A lot of what variable was changed was dependent on the athlete's feedback.
Okay.
So depending on what they were telling me, how they were doing, that dictated which variable I wanted to play with.
Okay. Yeah. So this kind of just evolved out of what the athlete was giving you feedback wise then. This wasn't like like you didn't write.
Exactly. It was, I had the idea that I wanted to increase those scores, but I was going to play with those 3 variables based on how it went and how the feedback was. Yeah.
Okay. Right on. Sweet. I think that was all the questions I had on that. Cool. So we're going to post this on YouTube. I think we'll probably post a link on Facebook or put a post up on Facebook or something. So if you guys are following us on Instagram, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you guys watch this, if you guys have found this on YouTube, just head over to our Instagram and give us a follow. Matt, you have anything else, or?
Nothing comes to mind.
Cool. Right on. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Hope this was helpful. We'll catch you guys next time.